friends, in the series which we are doing on the making of contemporary India from 1950 to 1990s, today we will talk about visual media in the context of cinema. In the earlier lecture on visual media in the context of the public sphere, we talked about cinema and of the period of before the independence, and that is the period of the colonial period when British they were there in India, and how Indians they tried to make certain films which were in a way influenced by the ideals of the national movement. And for the other films, or especially after independence, you can refer to the readings which are there. For example, A.R. Baji, 50 Years of Talkies from 1931 to 81, Shomai Chatterjee, Subject Cinema, Object Women, a study of the portrayal of women in Indian cinema, Gautam Kaul, Cinema and the Indian Freedom Struggle, T.M. Ramchandran, 70 Years of Indian Cinema, Feroz Rangoonwala's 75 Years of Indian Cinema, Vyas Thorawal, Cinema of India. So these are some of the readings which one can refer when one wants to understand the kind of themes, where the kind of changes which came especially after independence. And we find that when India became independent in 1947, some of the filmmakers now they were exposed to the international films as well, in that sense that the first International Film Festival of India, it was being organized in the early 1950s, and the Indian filmmakers they were also able to see the international cinema as well. And we find that some of the filmmakers they were making films being influenced by certain movements. For example, the Italian influence in the context of the neorealist films or the neorealist cinema. And if we see the neorealist cinema, we find that the non-professional actors they were being used in the neorealist films, and they preferred the outdoor locations, and the dialogues they were simple in nature, they were not melodramatic, and the issues of poverty, unemployment, they were more relevant in the neorealist films. And we also find that the neorealist filmmakers in Italy were De Sica, Roberto Rossellini, Visconti, Federico Fellini. And these filmmakers, when they were presenting their own themes which were dealing with the contemporary reality, some of the Indian filmmakers also started telling their own stories. And we find that filmmakers like Raj Kapoor, Bimal Roy, Guru Dutt, they made that kind of a cinema which can be referred as some sort of neo-realist in nature. And when one is seeing films like Do Bigha Zameen, which talks about depeasantization, Devdas, for example, which talks about the issues of class, Sujata, which is dealing with untouchability and the resolution of the issue, and the ideas of nation building. So we find that all these kinds of films, when one is watching these films, for example, Do Bigha Zameen, where a person has to take a loan, and then when he is not able to repay that loan of the mortgaged land which is there in the village, he comes to the city. And when he comes to the city, he has this kind of a hope that one day he will be able to collect that kind of a money when he can go back to his own village and get back his land. But actually, when you see the situation which is there in the city, when it is being contrasted, when it is being compared to the village, then we find that city life is not all that simple. Rather, it is more complex, it is more complicated, and how dehumanization is actually happening in the cities where people they are not treating others as humans. And when one is talking about a film called Devdas, we find that how not only the weak-willedness, that how Devdas was a weak-willed person, and because of his weak will, he was not able to decide that what the kind of a step which he has to take. But at the same time, the issues of class, they were also very, very relevant in those times. and especially after the independence of India, the ideas of nation building, they were more the filmmakers, they were also concerned with the idea of the nation building, along with the leaders of the independent India, because the kind of multiplicity of religions, regions, caste, languages which we see in India. So something should be there in terms of uniting all these people, and the ideas of nation building, they were very, very relevant in that context. We also find that other filmmakers, they were also trying to provide some kind of a critique of the society, the way there was an increasing materialism in the society, as you can see in the film Pyasa by Guru Dutt, and another film called Kagaz Ke Phool, which talks about the irrelevance of fame, and thereafter Sahib Bibi Aur Ghulam, which was there on the feudal setup, and where we find that the alcoholism of Meena Kumari is shown to be as some sort of a protest against the society. So such kind of portrayals or depictions, they were also trying to raise the consciousness of the society and force society to think on those lines. We also find that during this period, the 1950s, we have Mother India, in which Nargis played the female protagonist role, and this film was a remake of a film which was made by Mehboob Khan, by the same filmmaker Mehboob Khan in 1940, with the title of Aurat, in which Sardar Akhtar played the central role, and so he remade this film as Mother India in 1957, and how we find that the role of the moneylender in those times, that how they were ruthless, that was being shown, and a picture of the agricultural society which was comparatively very, very simple, and how nation as mother and mother as nation, both these kinds of ideas, they are being depicted in that way, that how finally Nargis kills her own son in the end to save the honor of a village girl. So these kinds of portrayals where we find that the question of ethics became more and more important, which was the concern for one's own son was not important. More important was the ethics of a mother, and how nation should also be seen as some sort of a mother. These kinds of ideas, they were being shown in a film called Mother India. And then there was another film called Andaz, which was a triangular love story, and which was a critique of the increasing modernization in the society, that how people, they are becoming more and more modern, and with this modernization we find that more complex problems could be seen in the society. We also find that films by Raj Kapoor, for example, Awara, which talks about the heredity and the environment debate, that whether heredity is more important or environment is more important in the growth or personality of an individual. Then Shri 420, which was again the critique of society. Jaagte Raho, for example, was innocent men's travails in a corrupt world. And there was another film called Prem Rog, which was advocating the widow remarriage, which was not there in the earlier, though it was there, but it was not being practiced to that extent, or the way it was being discouraged. So we find that how these films, they were trying to communicate an idea, how they were trying to criticize the society, the kind of steps the society should take so that better individuals are there in the society. And the way the juxtaposition of the society, which is shown to be corrupt, with an innocent person, which happens in the case of Jaagte Raho, and then the issue of the reform of the society, where the widow remarriage had to be promoted, as it was one of the neglected spheres in the context of the society. So all these kinds of concerns, they were very, very relevant at that point of time, and we find that especially the films of 1950s like Naya Daur and Paigam, where we find that how Naya Daur was in a way trying to communicate the idea of manual labor versus mechanization. And if we see Paigam, it is trying to show the capital versus labor conflict, how the industrial workers' rights they are being talked about. And then you have Sujata, which was talking about untouchability. So we find that all these films which became very popular in those times as well, and how they have been seen in the contemporary times as well, how they are being interpreted by the people, those who have watched them, by the critics, by the scholars, that how Naya Daur is talking in the framework of the idea of manual labor versus mechanization, whether we should go for consistent mechanization or we should place our reliance on the manual labor, and whether we should have that kind of a balance where the manual labor can be used to the maximum, and at the same time we can use machines where we can have where the work can be done at a faster rate. And similarly, Paigam talks about the issue of the rights of the workers. So it is in a way trying to communicate the idea of a trade union movement, that how when workers they will be united, then only they will be able to achieve their objectives in terms of bettering their condition, not only at the workplace but at other places as well, because unless they will be paid in a fair manner, they will not be able to raise their standard of living. Similarly, Sujata deals with the issue of untouchability and the kind of distinctions which are there in the society on the basis of birth, and even the way she is being adopted by a higher caste family, but at the same time all the time she is being referred to as a daughter like. She is not considered to be the daughter of the house. The role of the daughter of the house was played by Shashikala, and Nutan played the role of Sujata, where she is being treated as daughter like. And till the end we find that how a prospective bridegroom to Shashikala is interested in marrying Nutan, who is playing the role of Sujata. And finally, when the lady of the house, she in a way is accidentally injured, then Sujata is able to donate her blood to the mother, and how the blood of Sujata and the mother now they intermingle, and because of this intermingling we find that this kind of a distinction where she was being referred to as daughter like also goes away. So such kind of portrayals, they were talking about the ideas of nation building in that sense, that how these kind of distinctions, when they will go away over a period of time, then only we will be able to handle we will be able to see the society in that way where everyone will be treated equally. Then we also find in 1970s, which was the era of superstar Rajesh Khanna, where we find his romantic image, mannerisms and the hit songs, and some of the other films like Anand, where the issue of life and death, and Bawarchi, where family as a unit was being portrayed. So we find that during this period, especially in 1970s, when Rajesh Khanna became so popular that most of his films they were the blockbusters, and how his portrayals, especially in these two films, especially Anand, where the issue of death, which is imminent in nature, it is being portrayed, and how death is being approached in a very in a manner which is more lifelike, and the kind of fear which is being associated with death is not there in the individual. He is not concerned that way in terms of its portrayal, though he fears death that way when he talks to someone. So these kinds of issues, they are being dealt, and then the issue of the nuclear family or the joint family has been dealt in a film called Bawarchi, where as Indians, we find that joint family in the earlier times, they were the norm, but over a period of time we find that they were being converted into the nuclear families. Another development, especially in the 1970s, was the coming of Amitabh Bachchan, where we find the angry young man image which was being created, and the idea of anti-establishment, and how we see that he was being considered as the hero of the masses, in that sense that he was ready to fight for the rights of others. So this kind of an image was also because of the fact that we find that the problems concerned with unemployment, poverty, etc., they were rising in the 1970s, and people, they were feeling they were feeling dissatisfied with the establishment. So coming of a person who was ready to take on the establishment, who was ready to in a way provide the kind of solace to the common man, that there is someone who will fight for them. So these kinds of portrayals in 1970s, they made Amitabh Bachchan very, very popular in the 1970s and 80s as well. And in many of the films during this time, as we see that how cinema is also reflective of the kind of society, as it is being referred to as a mirror of the society as well. Then we also find during this time the middle class cinema of Hrishikesh Mukherjee, films like Chupke Chupke, which was dealing with the issue of the language in a very light-hearted manner, in a comedy. And similarly, a film called Golmaal, which was a comedy, but at the same time it was trying to communicate that traditions, they should be followed, and traditions are not there the way the people dress, the way their appearance is, but it is more in the kind of mindset which the people has. So traditions should be there, but the traditions should not be judged on the basis of the appearance. So this film tried to communicate that kind of an idea. Then another film called Khoobsurat, where women's behavior as an indicator of their sense of responsibility could be seen. And we find that such kind of portrayals which were dealing with the issue of women, because the way the gender operates, where the patriarchal mindset is there, that women, they have to conform in a certain manner, they have to behave in a certain manner, and their behavior will be also an indicative of their sense of responsibility. So the way Rekha, who plays the central role in this film, defies that kind of an idea through the director, and finally she is being accepted the way she is being there in the entire film. And there is another film called Choti Si Baat by Basu Chatterjee, which is again dealing with the day-to-day life of the people and the day-to-day issues of the people, though it is very light-hearted in nature, but at the same time it is also asking people to become more competitive, but at the same time not to lose their basics, their basic ethics, their basic charm which is there. So such kind of portrayals, they were dealing with the middle class cinema, of the middle class values of those times, they could be seen. And we also find during this time that there was some kind of a parallel cinema as well, with the coming of the Nouvelle Vague on 1969, with coming of Bhuvan Shom, which is to be seen as the harbinger of the kind of Nouvelle Vague cinema, or the new wave cinema. And we also have some filmmakers, those who were making films on the issues of poverty and the daily life struggle of the people, and filmmakers like Govindan Hilani with Ardh Satya and Akrosh, and Shyam Benegal with Ankur, Nishant, Manthan, and there were so many other films as well. And these filmmakers, they were in a way trying to communicate this kind of an ideas, that how films not always have to be mainstream in nature. They always do not have to have the kind of songs which are always there, the glamour kind of a thing which is there in the mainstream cinema. So films, they should be more meaningful in nature, they should be more purposeful in nature, they should be able to communicate the kind of general kind of ideas which are there prevalent in the society. We also find that the way we are able to present women in the films, that we either show them in good or bad, there are no shades of grey. So this is being also reinforced in the popular films. This kind of a dichotomy is there, and where they are being distinguished between the heroine and the vamp. So there are no grey areas for them, and the patriarchal society is trying to present them in that way, where either they are conformist in nature, that they are listening to the male elders, or even the male youngers in the family. Even if the brother is younger to a girl, even then she has to in a way listen to the younger brother. So these kinds of portrayals, where there is a lot of stereotyping, where women they have to be shown as docile or in a way noble or ideal, and on the other hand you have the other extreme, where you have the reckless women which are irresponsible in nature. And women characters, especially when they are heroine, they are shown to be the epitome of virtues and values. So these kinds of stereotyping which we find in certain films, where we find that cinema is more male centric in nature. Males are dominating in the films, and how women or the heroine is always secondary to the hero, and she does not have that kind of an independent status or existence, and her journey in the film is in a way explored in relation to the male character. So this in a way limits the women's roles to providing glamour, relief, respite and entertainment. So such kind of portrayals they were there, but we also find that arrival of the women script writers, or arrival of the female directors in the film medium, now more and more stories which are comparatively more natural in that sense, or which are more women centric, they are being shown on the Indian screen as well. And these kind of changes also came in the 1990s, when we find that changes in the themes and the presentation took place with the arrival of the multiplexes, where the low budgeted films, they could be shown on the smaller screens and with a lesser number of seats. For example, in a multiplex you may have 150 to 300 seats, but in a big hall you always had more than 1000 seats. So the coming of the multiplexes in a way allowed the low budget films to be exhibited, and now there was more concern or focus on the script as well. And we also find that some of the films which were very glossy in nature, which were in a way trying to cater to the NRI audience, which was based in Europe and America, they were also being made in the 1990s, bringing from DDLJ, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge and Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So all these films, they were trying to in a way promote basketball, Valentine's Day, greeting cards, etc. So these kinds of cultural goods, they could be promoted. And we also find that many a times these films, they also in a way promoted the local Indian customs like Karwa Chauth and Dandiya, etc., and how they were being created in some sort of a cultural capital. And they in a way tried to create Coca-colonization and McDonaldization for creating the homogeneous tastes and preferences. So in the later part we find that how the way the coming of the women in the film industry, where as film writers and film directors, many themes which were dealing especially with the women, like English by Gauri Shinde, or Kahani starring Vidya Balan, or Neel Bate Sannata by Ashwani Dheer Tiwari, or even Dangal. We find that the changes in the women's portrayal, they have appeared over a period of time. And we also see that animation films, they have also been made, either they have been based on mythological themes, on Krishna, Ganesh, etc., and there are others which are dealing. So animation sector has also come up very strongly, especially in the 1990s and thereafter. And we also find that how the placement of the products in many of the films, where the film stars, they will provide some kind of a credibility to these products which are being shown in the films. And this coming of the product placement also reduces the cost of the film as well, because they are being shown as some sort of an advertisements in the film itself. And many of the contemporary themes could also be seen recently. For example, Toiletic Prem Katha, then Padman by R. Balki, Badhai Ho, then Uri, the Surgical Strike, Badhai Do in 2020-22 by Harshvardhan Kulkarni. So all these films, they are trying to deal with the contemporary themes, whether in the context of the kind of rights which everyone has for their private space in terms of having toilet at all places, or the other issues as well, which are more contemporary in nature. So we find that how Indian cinema definitely in terms of an audio visual media has played an important role, and various kinds of themes which are part of the Indian films, they have tried to connect with the audience at all levels. And many of the contemporary issues in the society which have been shown in the films in the recent times, they also have tried to create an awareness among the audience. And at the same time, they have also initiated them to not only think, but at the same time to deliberate upon them, not only in terms of creating awareness, but at the same time to deliberate upon them and discuss them, and to bring them out of the closets in which they have been fixed. So we find that media definitely plays an important role, and cinema as a mass medium has definitely played an important role in the last, especially after independence, in the last 70-80 years, where we find that more and more films, as India was also the highest producer of films, and Indian films in different languages, not only in the Hindi, but there are so many regional languages as well, they have been made. So this journey of Indian cinema or Hindi cinema, it continues. So with this, I'd like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.